We're going to rock and roll here. Again, if you're new to this, every week we do a live Q&A to cover any fitness, health questions that may have come up for you. And then on last week's, we had someone add a question just shortly after we finished. So I'm going to add that here so everyone can see and reference. And I'll re-expand it so I can read it. So there's a couple parts to this one, so I'm going to go through a couple different aspects to it, and I'm going to kind of start at the end of it and go from there. So we'll go with it. So fitness question, it's something more curious rather than actual problem. So they say I've been doing 100 push-ups, 25 reps at a time, 5 minutes apart, 4 sets consistently every other day or every 3 days for about 5 months now. I still get worked by the same routine almost to the point of failure on a regular basis. It seems like it should be a little easier by now. My going theory is that I often don't get good sleep, which impedes muscle recovery. That, and I think my technique is always getting a little better, which makes it harder to do the exercise. For example, I recently started working on bending more on the elbows and less on the shoulders. Yeah, so there's a couple different factors there. I will say first and foremost that there are definitely variables that can impact performance. Sleep for sure is one, hydration, how well nourished and fed are we, both from a vitamin standpoint, a caloric standpoint, and even a macro balance standpoint can kind of have impacts upon that performance factor for us. So that can for sure impact us. Um, I guess one big question would be, what are you trying to get out of the workouts in that case? Um, as you change your form and technique, different muscles will be recruited, so it will definitely um, change the difficulty factor for that. Especially with something like push-ups, there are so many different ways you can arrange your hands, your elbow alignment, and form and placement with that to definitely have a big impact on the difficulty factor. Um, Also, depending upon what muscle groups do you want to isolate more. If you're trying to go more chest and triceps, you're going from about 45 degrees to straight next to the rib cage, which is going to be mostly triceps at that point, versus going more chest and then shoulders coming up and out here. I recommend trying to keep it somewhere neutral, and that way you get the most amount of recruitment from all the muscles involved in that push. But you can also vary the width, wide and narrow, to change how much more isolated you're in. And then there's a whole bunch of other factors that you can do for stability. Um, with the workout, I would say for most training purposes, 5 minutes is a bit long for a resting period. Um, Ideally, depending on what you're trying to do, I assume typically if someone's trying to do 100 push-ups, the goal is trying to increase that threshold. Um, a different technique that you might want to try is doing as many push-ups as possible your first set, all the way to failure. Give yourself two. You can go 5 minutes if you're truly going to complete failure with that, and then go again. Don't expect the same amount, but go again. Um, and then you can go one or two more times after that. And then what I usually recommend for people when we're trying to drastically increase our push-up threshold, um, for those follow-up sets, especially if we're seeing a drastic diminishment in the amount of push-ups you can get compared to the first set, finish off. So once you get to a point where you're failing with standard push-ups, go to a modified position where you're on your knees instead of your toes, get a few more reps in until you hit failure again, and then you start your break before you go to the next set with it. Um, Doing that can typically help get us a higher total number of push-ups in. And when it comes to both for strength and for what we call hypertrophy, which is the technical term for muscle growth. Training to failure consistently over a couple sets is going to get the best stimulus for that, versus and doing a smaller rest window. So what happens, for everything to kind of recover at the cellular level takes about 60 to 120 seconds for the muscle cell. And what happens is when you go, unless you're hitting true complete failure, your muscle's not recruiting every single muscle in that group. We're getting just a handful of what we call neuromuscular networks. If you give it full-time arrest, it's going to recruit the same networks that were recruited the first time. Whereas if you go to complete failure, we've pretty much taxed out everything to the max. And then when you come inside that 1 to 2 minute window, the first groups that it recruited are still tanked. So now it has to get deeper into the muscle recruitment systems to get additional muscle neural networks involved. That's how we get more breakdown, more fatigue, which then stimulates more protein synthesis after the workout to increase the muscle growth. You'll also increase your creatinine and creatine storage capabilities to increase the anaerobic capacity. And doing those higher reps, you also increase your aerobic capacity as well, especially for something like push-ups. That's going to get you the most advancement for what you're trying to achieve. There's some different things that you can try differently depending on what your main goal is. If you're just trying to do muscle development with minimal implements, you can always work on, adding a backpack or other things, or elevating your feet to increase the difficulty. If you're just trying to see how much push-ups you can do, just doing, again, first set full all the way to failure, can't do any more. Give yourself a short period of time. Go again when you hit that failure point, if you've seen a drastic diminishment from what your first set was to the next one, do some additional modified push-ups until you hit failure again, and then start your rest period before your third or fourth set from there. John is right. If you want to increase your push-ups, military training is the best, and that's where a lot of my techniques are coming from, was from PT training, in military prep and ROTC. If you do it over and over and over again, trauma and repetition is really the easiest way to increase that rep count for push-ups, sit-ups, really any body weight exercise. Just push-ups are the easiest because there's easy ways to modify. So once you hit that failure point, you can do a modified push-up for more repetitions to increase that fatigue threshold that much more. Whereas compared to doing sit-ups, squats, lunges, things like that, it's harder to modify those with less body weight and still do more repetitions with it. Let me go through this question, make sure any other components I missed. Okay, so I think covered most of that. Like I said, one of the big factors is always going to be, with any training program, you really got to ask, what am I trying to accomplish with the training? If it's just to get a good workout in, it can really be just about anything. But if you want to see progressive improvement, instead of doing the exact same workout every single time, then we've got to look at, even if you kept everything the same with this, but just simply said, I'm going to do 26 reps for each set of this. That way you're doing at least a little bit more every time you go in. If you're doing it every other day, within a couple of weeks, you're at 30 already. Within a month, you're going to be at about 35, and so on. It's just, you have to have the discipline and attitude of saying, I'm adding repetitions every single time I do my workout in order to increase that threshold. And if you're not going to add repetitions, then looking at adding other ways to make it more difficult, whether it be adding more weight onto your back with a push-up, elevating your feet to make the push-up that much harder. And then there's other balance variations that you can do as well, with either making your hands or toes on an unstable surface. But a lot of it all does come down to what your goals are with the workout itself, in order to really define what things we need to adjust or change to maximize your results from the workouts that you're doing. Especially if you're being consistent with the every other day. If you want to see progress, we want to make sure that we've got the right approach to it to optimize that for you. And that's one of the benefits of our different guided training programs, where you get the feedback from one of your trainers to say, okay, hey, you've been doing this for a week, 2 weeks, even 4 weeks. Now it's time to either change exercises, or we're going to change these other components, either with the repetition count, your rest periods, the volume of it, different things to still get more out of each individual workout, instead of feeling like you're doing the same thing over and over again. Because eventually you're going to hit a point of diminishing returns where the workout's no longer getting you any results, and you may even notice that it's not helping you sustain maintenance anymore, because your body gets so adapted and efficient at what you're doing that it's no longer requiring the same energy output that it was when you started with it. So just be mindful of that. And like I said, any training program, it always comes back to, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish with it? What do you want to see out of it, to make sure that we have the variables set up correct for your desired outcome. Hope that helped. If you guys have other questions, feel free to throw them in the comments. If you are watching this on replay, feel free, throw your questions in the comments. We'll follow up with them again on next week's episode. In the meantime, just remember to keep consistent. I hope everyone's having a good holiday season. Remember, you can have fun. Just stay on your routines and habits in between parties, holidays, and other fun activity times with that, okay? Because remember, the important thing is consistency, not perfection, okay? Enjoy your week. Happy holidays. We'll see you next week. Remember to stay persistent in your consistent pursuit of health.